The alarm started at 0400 hours station time. Not the usual warning beeps that everyone had learned to ignore, but the kind of sound that made your blood run cold. The deep, pulsing wail that meant something had gone very, very wrong. Across every monitoring station in Council space, operators jumped from their chairs, coffee cups forgotten, eyes locked on displays that showed something impossible. Something had just come out of the outer terminus. For those who don't know, the outer terminus isn't just dangerous. It's a death sentence. The gravitational forces there don't just crush ships, they tear them apart atom by atom. 300 years of space exploration, and not a single vessel had ever made it through. Plenty had tried. None had survived. The Council had long since declared it a no-go zone, a natural barrier that marked the edge of explorable space. Until now. Fleet Admiral Vartok had been in his quarters when the call came. 20 years of military service, and he'd never heard that particular tone of panic in his communications officer's voice. He'd thrown on his uniform and sprinted to the command center, his 4 legs carrying him faster than most species could run. When he burst through the doors, every screen in the room was focused on one thing. A single ship. Report, Vartok barked, his translator rendering his native clicks into Galactic Standard. Lieutenant Hayes turned from her console, her face pale. She was human. One of the few who'd been working with the Council for the past decade as part of the early cultural exchange program. Admiral, we have an unknown contact. It emerged from the terminus 7 minutes ago. That's impossible. Yes, sir. We thought so too. But the gravitational readings are confirmed. It came straight through the dead zone. Vartok studied the display. The ship was unlike anything in the Council database. Dark hull, angular design, no running lights. It wasn't trying to hide, it just didn't care about being seen. The energy readings coming off it made the sensors flicker and recalibrate every few seconds. Identification? He demanded. None, Admiral. We've broadcast on every known frequency. No response. Not even acknowledgement that our hails exist. Hayes pulled up another screen. The energy signatures are completely unprecedented. Our best computers can't make sense of them. It's like trying to measure something that doesn't follow physics as we understand it. A chill ran through Vartoka's body. Current heading? Direct line toward Council space. No deviation. Current speed would put it at the inner colonies in 72 hours. The command center erupted into controlled chaos. Officers shouted orders, screens lit up with tactical data, communication channels opened to every major fleet in the sector. Within minutes, the Council's emergency protocol activated. 3 fleets began moving into position. First, the Vraxian Empire's dreadnought fleet, Vartoka's own command, the pride of his people. Massive warships that had never lost a battle. Second, the Korthian shield wall, a defensive formation so tight that nothing had ever broken through. Third, the Zenari Swarm Collective, consisting of thousands of smaller craft that moved like a single organism. Combined, over 4,000 warships. Enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. Enough ships to blot out a sun. They formed a blockade in the Helion corridor, the main approach to Council space. It was the perfect position, narrow enough that nothing could slip past, but wide enough to bring all their weapons to bear. Admiral Vartok stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the unknown vessel approach. It was still hours away, but it hadn't slowed down. Hadn't changed course. Hadn't responded to any of the hundreds of hails they'd sent. Maybe they don't understand our languages, suggested Commander Blake, another human on his staff. The young man looked nervous, hands clasped behind his back. Or maybe they don't care, Vartok replied quietly. The Council issued one final warning, broadcast with enough power to be heard across half the sector. Unknown vessel, this is the Galactic Council Defense Command. You are approaching sovereign space. Halt immediately or be destroyed. You have 10 minutes to comply. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Then an hour. The ship maintained course. No response. No deviation. No sign it had even received the message. Vartok felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders. 4,000 ships. Millions of lives under his command. The safety of trillions more behind him. He thought about his family back home, about the peace that had lasted for 3,000 cycles. He opened a fleet-wide channel. His voice was steady, carrying the authority of someone who'd made difficult decisions before. All ships, this is Fleet Admiral Vartok. Arm all weapons. Target the unknown vessel. Prepare to fire on my command. The unknown ship crossed into weapons range. Still no response. Still no change. Vartok took one last look at the tactical display. At the dark, angular ship that had emerged from a place nothing should survive. At his fleet, arrayed in perfect formation. He gave the order that would change everything. All fleets, open fire. The first shot fired at exactly 1427 Galactic Standard Time. Admiral Vartok watched from his command deck as 3,000 ships opened fire simultaneously. The void lit up like a newborn star. Plasma lances, superheated streams of matter that could melt through a battleship's armor in seconds. Quantum torpedoes that phased through shields and detonated inside hulls. Graviton beams that crushed targets into dense spheres of compressed metal. These weren't experimental weapons. These were proven killers that had ended wars and toppled empires. Every single weapon struck the unknown ship at the same moment. The ship's shields flickered to life. But they weren't like any shields Vartok had ever seen. They didn't glow with the usual blue or green energy fields. Instead, they shimmered with colors that seemed to shift and change like oil on water, like something that existed partially outside normal space. The impacts hit. And then they just stopped. The energy didn't bounce off. It didn't overload the shields. It simply vanished, absorbed into that strange iridescent field as if the most powerful weapons in the galaxy were nothing more than raindrops hitting an ocean. Lieutenant Hayes stared at her console, her hands shaking. "Sir, the ship's shields didn't even register strain. It's like we didn't hit it at all." Then the unknown ship fired back. Vartok had seen ships destroyed before. Explosions, debris fields, escape pods launching in desperate attempts to save lives. He'd seen the chaos of battle, the flash of reactors going critical. This was nothing like that. The vanguard of his fleet, 287 Vraxian warships, each one carrying a crew of 800, simply ceased to exist. There was no explosion. No flash of light. No debris field. One moment they were there on his tactical display, solid contacts with life signs and power signatures. The next moment, nothing. Not even static. Just empty space where ships and people had been 4.3 seconds before. "Report." Vartoka's voice cracked. "What happened to the vanguard?" They're gone, sir." Hayes's voice was barely a whisper. "Sensors show no debris. No energy dispersal. No radiation. It's like they were never there." "That's impossible. Ships don't just disappear." "Sir, I'm reading the logs. The weapon signatures don't match anything in our database. It's like the ship removed them from reality itself." Before anyone could process that nightmare, the unknown ship began to move. Ships don't move like that. They can't. Even with the best engines and the most advanced navigation computers, ships need time to calculate trajectories, to adjust course, to avoid collisions. Battle maneuvers take planning, coordination, split-second decisions by experienced crews. The ship moved like thought itself. It slipped between his battle formations with impossible precision, weapons firing in sequences that should have required minutes to calculate. But it wasn't calculating. It was simply executing as if it already knew exactly where every ship would be before they moved. Another salvo. 16 Vraxian destroyers vanished. Then 23 cruisers. The ship wasn't shooting wildly. Every shot was perfect, surgical, removing targets with the efficiency of a surgeon's scalpel. Commander Blake gripped his console, his knuckles white. "Admiral, we need to pull back." "We can't." Vartok snapped. "If we break formation, that thing reaches the inner colonies. We hold the line." The Korthian shield wall tried to adapt. Their specialty was gravitational warfare, creating artificial gravity wells that could trap ships, slow them down, pull them off course. They activated their most powerful generators, creating a gravity field that should have crushed the unknown ship like a tin can. The ship flew through it as if gravity was merely a suggestion it chose to ignore. Commander Blake watched his sensors in disbelief. It's not even compensating. It's like the gravity well doesn't exist for it. The Zenari Swarm Collective launched their answer. 10,000 strike craft, small and fast, designed to overwhelm point defenses through sheer numbers. They'd broken fleet formations before, swarming capital ships like insects, finding weak points in armor and shields. The unknown ship's response was immediate. Its point defense systems activated, creating a perfect sphere of destruction around itself. Not a wall. Not a barrier. A sphere where anything that entered simply stopped existing. The Zenari craft rushed in wave after wave and died by the hundreds. None got within 5 kilometers. Not one. Vartok watched his fleet die. Watched decades of military doctrine, thousands of years of tactical knowledge, crumble against something that shouldn't exist. His ships were firing continuously now, desperate salvos that accomplished nothing. The unknown ship continued its advance, methodical and unstoppable. His communications officer shouted over the chaos. "Admiral, the Corthian flagship it's gone. Just like the others." The battle, if it could even be called that, lasted 4 minutes. At exactly 14:31 Galactic Standard Time, the unknown ship stopped firing. It simply ceased all weapons activity and continued on its course. Vartok looked at his tactical display with numb horror. Of the 4,000 warships that had formed the blockade, fewer than 800 remained. And they only survived because they hadn't been in the ship's direct path. Then, for the first time, the ship communicated. The message came through every frequency simultaneously, broadcast in perfect galactic standard with no accent, no inflection, just calm and matter-of-fact. Path cleared. Proceeding to diplomatic coordinates. The unknown ship continued forward, leaving behind the shattered remains of 3 fleets and the broken faith of an entire galaxy. The finest military force ever assembled had lasted 4 minutes against a single vessel. And it had called them a path obstruction. The council chambers were quiet for the first time in 3 days. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the heavy silence that comes after a catastrophe when people are too shocked to speak. Dr. Helen Carter sat at her workstation, surrounded by holographic displays showing data from the battle. She'd been staring at the same numbers for 6 hours straight, hoping they'd change. Hoping she'd made a mistake. She hadn't. "This can't be right," Helen muttered to herself, running the analysis program for the 15th time. Same results. Always the same impossible results. Director Paul Grant noticed her distress from across the room. He'd been coordinating the recovery efforts, trying to account for the thousands of ships and hundreds of thousands of crew members who'd simply vanished. He walked over, carrying 2 cups of something that barely qualified as coffee. "You look like you've seen a ghost. What did you find?" Helen took the coffee without looking at it. Her eyes stayed locked on the screen. "Paul, I need you to look at something. Tell me if I'm reading this wrong." He leaned over her shoulder, studying the power output graphs. "What am I looking at?" "That spike there, that's when the human ship's shields activated. See the energy signature?" She zoomed in on the data. "Now look at the sustained output during the entire engagement." Paul squinted at the numbers. 23%? That's the maximum it reached. That's not the maximum. That's the average. It never went above 23% power output during the entire battle. Helen pulled up another screen. "And look at the shield stress readings. 0. Flat line. Our combined fleets hit it with enough firepower to vaporize a small moon, and its shields didn't even strain. Maybe the sensors were malfunctioning. After what we saw. I thought that too. So I checked the sensor logs from 8 different ships, all different makes and models, all different positions in the formation. They all show the same thing." Helen's hands trembled slightly as she brought up the weapons analysis. "And this is the part that really scares me. We detected 7 distinct weapon signatures during the engagement. 7 different weapons. Okay, so it has multiple weapon systems. That's not unusual. Paul, our deep scan analysis detected energy signatures for at least 40 different weapons on that ship. Maybe more. The sensors couldn't get a complete read." She turned to face him. "It used 7 weapons out of 40 plus. Against 3 fleets. Against 4,000 ships." The director's face went pale. "Are you saying?" "I'm saying it was holding back." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. From across the room, Admiral Vartoka's voice cut through the silence. Holding back. He'd been listening. Of course he had. He stalked over to the workstation, his alien features twisted in disbelief. "That thing destroyed 3 fleets in 4 minutes. How can you possibly say it was holding back?" Helen stood up to face him, though he towered over her. "Because the data doesn't lie, Admiral. Let me show you something else." She pulled up the tactical recording, the moment-by-moment replay of the battle that she'd watched so many times it haunted her dreams. Watch the engagement pattern. Frame by frame. The hologram played in slow motion. The human ship moved through the fleet like a dancer, weapons firing with mechanical precision. There, Helen froze the image. Your flagship. The warrior's pride. See these trajectories? She highlighted several paths in red. Clean shots. Perfect firing solutions. The human ship had at least 300 opportunities to destroy your ship during the engagement. Vartok stared at the display, his breathing shallow. It never took them, Helen continued quietly. Not once. Every single kill, and I've analyzed all of them, was either a ship actively shooting at it or a ship directly in its path. It didn't fire on ships that were retreating. It didn't pursue damaged vessels. It didn't target command ships or flagships specifically. She looked at the admiral. This wasn't a berserker rampage. This wasn't even a battle. Then what was it? Vartoka's voice was barely a whisper. Director Grant spoke up, his voice grim. It was professional. Rules of engagement. Proportional response to an identified threat. It fought like a military vessel following a strict code of conduct. The implications crashed through the room like a physical wave. This wasn't some alien monster that had stumbled into council space. This was a disciplined military asset, operating under orders, following protocols. Wesley Park, the council's diplomatic liaison, had been silent until now. He was a quiet man, the kind who noticed things others missed. He'd been reviewing the communication logs. I found something, he said, his voice cutting through the growing murmur of conversation. The message it sent after the engagement: path cleared. Proceeding to diplomatic coordinates. We all heard it, someone said. Yes, but I checked our records. 3 months ago, the Council sent first contact invitations to 12 newly detected civilizations. Standard protocol, we invite them to Outpost Kepler 442b for preliminary talks. Wesley pulled up the transmission logs. Humanity was on that list. They were invited. They were expected. The room went dead silent. They sent that ship. Helen's voice trailed off as her mind raced through the implications. As a diplomatic escort, Wesley finished. This wasn't an invasion. This wasn't a war party. From their perspective, they were just traveling to a diplomatic meeting, and they encountered an obstacle, our fleets, and they removed it. Someone in the back of the chamber whispered the question everyone was thinking. If that's their escort vessel, what are their actual warships? Nobody had an answer. And that, perhaps, was the most terrifying thing of all. The transport touched down at Outpost Kepler 442b 3 days after the battle. The docking bay had been prepared for weeks. Banners from every council species hung from the walls, translation devices tested and retested, refreshments from a dozen worlds carefully arranged. It was supposed to be a celebration of first contact, a joyous occasion marking humanity's entry into the galactic community. Instead, it felt like a funeral. Ambassador Jennifer Walsh was the first to step off the transport. She was a woman in her mid-50s, with brown hair streaked with gray and smile lines around her eyes that suggested someone who laughed often. She wore a simple dark blue suit with a small earth pin on the lapel. Nothing intimidating. Nothing military. She looked like someone's friendly aunt, the kind who brought cookies to neighborhood gatherings. Hello. She extended her hand toward Council Director Kyle Abbott with genuine warmth. I'm Ambassador Walsh. It's wonderful to finally meet you all in person. Apologies for the delay, our escort encountered some debris in the Helion corridor. Nothing serious, but it did slow us down a bit. Debris. She called it debris. Kyle felt his stomach drop. He was a career diplomat, trained to maintain composure in any situation. But this woman had just casually referred to the deaths of hundreds of thousands as a minor navigation inconvenience. He exchanged quick glances with his advisors. They looked just as horrified. Ambassador Walsh, Kyle began carefully, choosing each word like he was defusing a bomb. About that debris. Your escort encountered 3 of our most powerful military fleets. Over 4,000 warships. Jennifer's warm smile faltered. Her eyebrows drew together in confusion. I'm sorry, what? The debris you mentioned. It was our ships. Your escort destroyed 3 entire fleets in the Helion corridor. The color drained from Jennifer's face. Oh dear. That's not... She fumbled in her jacket pocket, pulling out a slim data pad. Her fingers moved quickly across the screen, pulling up reports. Let me check the logs. There must be some mistake. The council delegation watched in tense silence as she read. They could see her expression change, confusion, then concern, then something that looked like embarrassment. Yes, I see it now. Jennifer looked up, genuinely distressed. The UENS Quiet Resolve logged the incident as minor navigational obstruction cleared per standard defensive protocols. There's a note here that your fleets initiated hostile action first. Yes. We did fire first, Kyle admitted. The ship wasn't responding to our hails. It emerged from a region of space that nothing survives. We didn't know. That explains the response pattern, Jennifer interrupted, still reading the report. Resolve's AI is programmed to prioritize de-escalation, but only after establishing clear force superiority. It's a safety protocol, show overwhelming power immediately to discourage further aggression. She looked genuinely apologetic. I'm very sorry about this. 4 minutes is actually quite efficient, which means Captain Miller must have been running tight combat drills. But still, this level of lethality for a first contact situation is unfortunate. Less lethality. She was suggesting the AI had been too lethal in its 4-minute dismantling of the galaxy's finest military forces. Dr. Helen Carter, who'd been standing with the diplomatic team, couldn't stay quiet any longer. Ambassador, with all respect, your ship used only 7 weapon systems. We detected signatures for over 40. It operated at 23% power capacity. It had hundreds of opportunities to destroy our command ships and deliberately didn't take them. She paused. Was it really trying to de-escalate? Jennifer looked at Helen with surprise, then something that might have been respect. You're very observant. Yes, exactly right. Resolve followed its engagement doctrine perfectly. Use minimum necessary force, avoid command structure casualties to prevent command chaos, establish superiority without excessive destruction. She smiled sadly. In our military, that's considered a textbook defensive response. I can see why it might not look like de-escalation from your perspective. Kyle felt like the ground was shifting under his feet. Ambassador, you keep calling your ship an escort. What class of vessel is the Quiet Resolve? Oh, she's a light diplomatic protection frigate. Class 7 rating, I believe. Standard issue for diplomatic missions through unsecured space. A frigate. A light frigate. What the Council had classified as a super dreadnought, what had single-handedly destroyed 3 fleets, was something humanity considered barely adequate to protect a diplomat on a routine trip. What's a Class 7 rating? Someone asked from the back of the delegation. Jennifer tilted her head thoughtfully. It's a size classification. Class 1 would be something like a shuttle or personal craft. Class 7 is a small military vessel, frigates, corvettes, light patrol ships. Nothing too serious. She said it so casually, like she was discussing different models of cars. Admiral Vartok, who'd insisted on being present for the meeting, spoke up for the first time. His voice was hoarse. If that's Class 7, what's Class 1 through 6? What's Class 8 and above? Jennifer considered the question. Well, Class 8 would be destroyers and cruisers. Class 9 is battleships and carriers. Class 10 is dreadnoughts. She paused. We don't technically have a Class 11 yet, but the Seoul Defense Fleet is working on some experimental designs. The silence stretched on. Nobody knew what to say. The ship that had effortlessly carved through their finest military forces was considered a light patrol craft in humanity's navy. They had things called dreadnoughts that were 3 classes larger. Jennifer seemed to notice the stunned expressions. She looked around at the carefully prepared welcome ceremony, at the faces of people trying to process what she'd just told them, at the banners and refreshments that now seemed absurdly optimistic. I've made this awkward, haven't I? She said softly. Then she straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin slightly, that warm smile returning. Well, let's start over. Humanity received your invitation 3 months ago, and we're very excited to join the galactic community. We've brought our credentials for council admission, cultural exchange proposals, and some Earth coffee, which I'm told is quite good. She extended her hand again toward Kyle. Shall we begin? The vote happened faster than anyone expected. 9 seconds. That's all it took for humanity's application to the Galactic Council to pass with unanimous approval. In 3,000 years of council history, nothing had ever been decided that quickly. Usually, applications took months of debate, committee reviews, cultural assessments, and political maneuvering. But nobody wanted to vote against the species that had casually referred to destroying 3 fleets as clearing debris. 2 weeks after the vote, Admiral Vartok received an unexpected invitation. The humans wanted to give him a personal tour of their space. A gesture of goodwill, they called it. A chance to see Earth and meet their people. Vartok accepted, though his hands shook as he held the invitation. He wasn't sure if this was an honor or a death sentence. The human ship that picked him up was comfortable, almost luxurious. The crew was friendly, too friendly actually. They smiled and joked and offered him snacks like they were taking him on a vacation, not escorting a military commander who'd attacked their diplomatic vessel. It was deeply unsettling. Captain Russell Davis met him at the Neptune dockyards, 3 weeks' travel from Earth. Russell was younger than Vartok expected, maybe 40 in human years, with an easy smile and a relaxed manner that seemed completely at odds with the military environment around them. Welcome to Neptune orbit, Admiral, Russell said, shaking his hand firmly. Thanks for making the trip. I know it's a long way from Council space. Thank you for the invitation, Captain. Vartok looked out the viewport at the massive structure floating in the darkness. This is your shipyard? One of them. We've got 3 major yards in the Sol system. One at Mars, one here at Neptune, and one out past Pluto for the really big stuff. Russell gestured toward the observation deck. Come on, I'll show you around. The docking bay opened onto a platform that overlooked the construction area. Vartok stopped dead when he saw what they were building. The ship was enormous, easily 3 times the size of his former flagship, the Warrior's Pride. Maybe 4 times. It was still incomplete. He could see the skeletal framework, the exposed internal systems, crews of workers swarming over every surface like insects on a carcass. This is a light explorer class, Russell explained casually, like he was showing off a new car. Still a few months from completion. She's designed for long-duration missions beyond the galactic rim. Vartok's translator must have malfunctioned. Beyond the rim? You mean outside the galaxy? Yeah, that's right. These explorers are built to handle really deep space. The kind of environment where you might not see another star for years. Russell pulled up a holographic display showing the ship's specifications. Self-sustaining life support, advanced recycling systems, heavy shielding for cosmic radiation and gravitational anomalies. She can handle pretty much anything. But why? Vartok couldn't understand. Why go beyond the rim? There's nothing out there but death. Russell looked at him with genuine confusion. That's where things get really dangerous. Rogue asteroid fields, stellar anomalies, gravitational vortexes, dark matter concentrations. You know, the challenging stuff. That's exactly why we need ships that can handle it. The words hit Vartok like a physical blow. The challenging stuff. Humans looked at the vast empty darkness beyond the galaxy, the space that every other species feared and avoided, and called it a challenge. They built ships specifically to go there, not out of necessity but out of curiosity. He understood then with a clarity that terrified him. Humanity didn't see the galaxy as something to conquer. They didn't see it as a prize or a territory to claim. They saw it as a space that might actually be safer and more predictable than where they'd come from. Earth, their home world, had tried to kill them so many times that they'd learned to see danger as normal, as manageable, as something to explore rather than avoid. Are you all right, Admiral? Russell asked, noticing his distress. You look pale. Well, paler than usual. Is that offensive? I'm still learning alien biology. I'm fine, Vartok lied. Just processing. 6 months after humanity's admission to the Council, Ambassador Jennifer called for a full assembly. Every species sent representatives. Every council member attended. The chamber was packed for the first time in years. Jennifer stood at the central podium, her expression serious. We've detected anomalies beyond the galactic rim. Our deep space monitoring stations have picked up signals, organized patterns that suggest intelligent origin. Our analysts have been studying them for the past 3 months. The chamber erupted into nervous murmurs. Beyond the rim meant outside the galaxy, in the vast darkness that nothing survived. The patterns are getting stronger, Jennifer continued. More frequent. More organized. Whatever is making them is getting closer to our galaxy. Our models suggest first contact with this intelligence will occur within the next 2 to 5 years. Council Director Kyle Abbott leaned forward. What kind of intelligence are we talking about? We don't know. But the energy signatures involved are significant. Large scale. Whatever they are, they're not small. Jennifer paused, letting that sink in. Humanity learned a long time ago that survival isn't about being the strongest or the fastest. It's about standing together. Facing threats as a unified front. She looked around the chamber, making eye contact with representatives from dozens of species. When this threat arrives, and our models strongly suggest it will, humanity will stand with you. We're extending a formal proposal for a mutual defense pact. Combined military protocols, shared intelligence, coordinated response strategies. The chamber fell silent. This was the moment. The choice that would define the next era of galactic civilization. Kyle stood slowly. He thought about the quiet resolve, the ship that had destroyed 3 fleets while holding back. He thought about the Explorer-class vessel at Neptune, built to explore places where death lived. He thought about what humanity might consider an actual threat. The Council accepts, he said clearly. Unanimously. Not because they wanted humanity's protection. Not because they sought shelter behind human weapons. But because they'd seen what humanity called a light frigate, and they were genuinely terrified to learn what humanity considered dangerous enough to worry about. The galaxy had new apex predators. They were called humans. They'd evolved on a world that tried to kill them daily, in a system that tested them constantly, and they'd responded by building ships to explore places even more dangerous. And for the first time in galactic history, everyone else was grateful these predators were on their side.